This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And I am so excited to welcome to our global community today somebody who, when we were pre-recording, I said, I feel like I know you because this person's personal brand, professional brand is someone that I see recommended all over the place. I think we've been missing each other at expos for years. And I am beyond honoured that she's going to give us time today to talk through some really, I think, powerful topics that might be quite emotive for a lot of you listening. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rebecca Shannon, who is indeed the queen of heart-led leadership. I have to do the heart. Welcome to you today, Rebecca. How are you?
Oh, thank you. What an introduction. Yeah, I'm wonderful. And it's so great to be here. As you say, it's taken us a little while to get here, but we're here. And yeah, it's wonderful. So yeah, and I'm excited to see what unravels in our conversation.
Absolutely. For anyone that's been listening in recent weeks, I decided early on in 2025 to stop sending out pre-agreed questions because I find that very often I get distracted during the conversation and I've been recruiting and interviewing for 26 years. If I can't just let things flow, then I should not be in this job. So this is very much an open conversation. So there will be people who maybe, the algorithm hasn't brought them to you yet, but they're clicking on because they like the sound of the topic. Give us an introduction as to who you actually are and what you do and what led you to this.
Yeah, okay. Gosh, so it's quite a long story. So I've been in recruitment for over 30 years, or nearly 30 years. So I joined as a consultant, joined Hayes back in 1996,
Wow.
before we had PCs, before the internet, before, we were still getting faxes through.
Yeah.
So I learnt my trade in recruitment, if you like, as a recruiter, and then moved within the Hayes structure. I moved to working much more as a project manager, really. So
Okay.
for nearly 15 years, I worked with some of the most senior people in the Hayes organization on anything that wasn't actually doing the recruiting, but everything that supported the recruiting.
Okay.
So operations, back office, finance, building new teams, did a lot of work with them on our RPOs and MSPs when they were first coming into fruition, really. So worked on some of those. And so I really got a depth and breadth of experience within recruitment. It's quite unusual,
Yeah,
actually.
very much so.
Yeah, and I worked with the best. I mean, like or loathe the big giants within recruitment. Back in the day, I started when they were just Montrose, actually, which was a
Wow, Hayes
organisation.
Montrose.
Montrose, yeah, and then it became construction
Gosh.
and property, and then it became part of the big Hayes organisation. And I worked with some of the best in the industry, and so really had a fantastic career there. Fast forward, through that career, so I was there about 15 years, and life had changed. By then, I had two children. I had a father who'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was living in Kent, traveling into London, and all the stuff that we try and juggle. And I was just a bit like, do you know what? I think I want to do something else. I built up such a great team around me. By the time I left, I had a fantastic team of women, predominantly, who I'd built as my legacy, really. So everything that I'd done through my career, I'd built into the team around me. So they barely missed me when I left, which is the best way to
Good.
leave as a leader, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of the things that we built are still in place, as far as I'm aware, within Hayes. And it's great because every now and again people pop out of the woodwork who I used to work with and used to know. Some are now my clients. So many years later are my clients now, which is amazing. So did that, left, and started my own company as project management consultancy.
Okay.
When I left, I took a year off to do nothing and then realized I'm not very good at doing nothing. So I started a company. You'll love this, Leisha. On exactly the same day, I launched my company, my consultancy company, on the day I found out I was pregnant with my third child. So
Wow.
that was good timing. Uh,
Great.
and then did that for a few years. Hadn't had my baby, my little one, and it was great, and I loved it. And I had lots of great contracts. A lot of them were back with recruitment companies, so doing tech projects and all sorts of fun stuff.
Great.
Started to feel like that project management was something that I'd kind of done and I was moving away from. And through a variety of events that happened, including my husband and I splitting up in the midst of all of this, I realized that it really wasn't making me very happy anymore.
Mm.
And I stumbled across an organization called One of Many, who's a women's leadership and empowerment community. And they had this great advert at the time, which was, are you Superwoman? Are you trying to do everything? Are your relationships breaking down? Are you tired all the time? And I was like, oh my God, they're talking to me. So I signed up, did some courses with them, and then they were certifying people as coaches
Right.
to deliver their leadership, to deliver their programs. And I was like, do you know what? I need something in my life right now that's going to like call me forward. So I signed up, did a year of learning how to be a coach with them, and was all set to launch my coaching business, to change everything up, really launch my coaching business. And then my dear father passed away exactly the day that I was due to kind of to launch. So
Wow.
put it on hold for a little bit and just sort of, did what I needed to do to look after myself and my family at that time. And then in 2019, came back to my coaching, relaunched as a coach, and really came home, I think, actually, Alicia, because what I realized was when I looked back and all the work I did around coaching was that I'd always been a coach. If I looked back in all the jobs that I'd
Yeah.
done, even when I was a little girl, really, I'd always coached people. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that that's what I was doing, but I started to see
Oh,
those threads of gold all the way through. And although I trained as a women's empowerment coach, actually, I've learned a lot of different modalities since. And I invest a lot of money in my own coaching. I coach what my niche is human
yeah.
being. So I
Yeah.
coach women, I coach men, I coach entrepreneurs, I coach recruiters, I coach people who aren't in recruitment, and I absolutely love it. So I've been doing that now since 2019. Evolved a lot, and every year I'm evolving more.
For
Um,
sure.
and really now I coach people who are interested in self-leadership. That's where I come from.
I
So it's
love
really
that.
people who want to lead themselves, regardless of what their title is, what their job is, what their business is. It's people who want to show up and lead their own lives.
Lead their own lives, and that's based on your lived experience quite clearly. That oozes out of you, Rebecca, if you don't mind me saying. It's your passion, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely my passion. That's why I say it feels like I've come home. It
I'm
it
so
just
pleased.
it just is everything that I love, that I'm passionate about, and I get to do the best job in the world.
You
I have to say,
do. Well,
best job in
clearly,
the world.
the best job in the world, and you're clearly brilliant at it. And I know how well regarded you are by people that I think, you have coached. So that's amazing. It's not just from what we see on LinkedIn. I think that is it. I'm really glad that I asked you to do the sort of eclectic story of where you are and how you've got to be here. The golden thread all the way through is that clearly this is something you've been passionate about. And actually, before we started recording, you sort of dropped the bombshell, and it made me, I guess, reveal to you that all the way through my life, I've known that, I'm a certain type of person and I don't want to conform. And you said, well, actually, very often the people that come to me as potential coaches are those that have found themselves trapped in that, trying to conform and be like everyone else. So can you just explain the context of where that conversation came from? And then let's delve deeper, because this is going to
Yeah.
resonate with everybody listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started talking about how we know each other because we both show up so authentically,
Yeah.
and unapologetically. I often get people saying, "Oh God, you're all over LinkedIn." I'm like, "Yeah, sorry," and I'm
Yeah.
not going to apologize for it. I
Yeah.
show up in all areas of my life.
Yeah.
More recently, that's been a journey. And I know you were saying the same. And one of the things that I learned, and I believe it was in conversation with Steve Chandler, who's an amazing coach, retired now, was known as the godfather of coaching. And he talked about how when we're at a very young age, so normally he's American, so he talked about it like middle school. So you're talking like 12 to 15 kind of
Okay.
age, right?
Mhm.
Is we're desperately trying to fit in at that age generally.
Yeah.
Okay, now you were saying that actually you always wanted to not fit in, right? But most people will try and fit into whatever's going on around them.
Yeah.
So, we talk about cliques at school and, the cool kids or the geeky kids or whatever. And
Yeah.
whatever your jam is, you try and fit in.
Mm.
Which is fine. It's a survival mechanism, essentially. It's to keep ourselves safe.
Cycle. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Which I talk about a lot with people that I work with. The issue is that most of us, we try so desperately to fit in, which generally means we're not really truly being ourselves. So we
Yeah.
create this persona that fits in, that's
Mhm.
safe, that feels accepted and seen, and all those sorts of things. And we kind of get locked in because it's such an important developmental
Yeah.
age. We
Yeah.
kind of get locked in.
Yeah.
And then what happens is we go and have that same persona and follow the same patterns all the way through our life. So
Mm.
wherever we go first to go to a job, guess what? We try and fit into there. So then we create an even less of us. and then the next job and the next job and the next job. So it basically means that when I said about coming home to me, because we spend most of our lives not being ourselves. And so this is an arc that we see with people that do come to self-development or come to coaching or come to just showing up in their own lives, is you see this arc of almost coming back to where they began, which is why I often talk about, say to people, what did you love doing as a kid? Before the world told you what you love doing, you should love doing. What did you love doing? And that often, and we talked about gold threads already, is a thread that I'll be like, oh, okay, well, let's follow that and see where it takes us. And interestingly, one of the things that came up in a recent conversation with someone who works with me, Jenny Armstrong, I'll give her a shout out. She's an amazing recruiter and runs Bohemian HR. And she said one of the things she realized in the work that we were doing together was that she was so intent on building her business as she thought it should be. I should be doing this. I should be following this. I should be, all that noise that we get from everyone else in the industry. And actually, in the work that we've done together, what she realized and what I helped her see was, what if you showed up and ran the business as you? What if you brought all of you to the business? And of course, she's completely shifted her business and her life in that time. So that's the arc that we were talking about earlier.
Do you think that for people to arrive at that decision that they know that they're not being authentic and true to themselves, do you think it's usually because, I mean, for me, I look back on that young Leisha and all the way through, and that includes going to an all-girls school, I did not try and conform. I wasn't in any cliques. It didn't bother me. It was literally water off a duck's back. I was just so happy. And I realised now it's only, like you say, when you become an adult and you kind of almost have to conform. I was seen as a maverick in my first recruitment job because I was classed as unmanageable because I was just so set in how I wanted to do things, which was always the right way, by the way. And actually, I realize now it's because I was challenging them being unethical. That's a whole different conversation. But for me, it was, it was circumstance that led me to set up on my own. But how many people actually almost need that to happen where it's circumstance that makes them stop and go, I'm not being true to myself? Or do you think that there is a bit of a narrative now, thanks to LinkedIn, that we should become more authentic because of things like personal brand?
Yeah, well, I think both can exist. I have several little power words, and one of them is "and," right? So, both of those things can exist at the same time. There are several people, myself included, who have come to that because something in our life has shifted fundamentally, and we kind of have been forced into that, right? Mine was my husband and my marriage breaking up, and everything that I believed suddenly got thrown out of the window. And I know you had a similar and different experience, right? So sometimes it can be circumstances happen, and sometimes it can just be that we just start seeing the world differently. Women particularly, and I can't speak for men as much in this because I've experienced myself, but women, we talk about the perimenopause and menopause being a really significant and exciting time for women, because often that is when they shed the I care about other people and what they think about me or how I should be, and actually start going, I don't really care. I'm going to show up how I want to show up. So I think both are true, and it's a question actually that people come to me with is, do I only come to this when something awful happens? And I'm like, well, yes and no. You could choose, right? And I do think this is something, a little plug for coaching here. I do think a lot of people still see coaching as something that they come to when something's wrong, when something's happened, when there's something to get over or challenge or whatever, going on in life. And one of the things I really point people to is, yes, it can be very helpful in those times, obviously. And I love working with people who are like, do you know what? My life's great. I love where I'm at. I've got great relationships with people, and there's something else that I want in my life. And it might be build a business. It might be to leave a legacy. It might be to travel more, whatever it is. It might be to learn to sing, dance, whatever. That is also another time to come to coaching. And if you don't know what that thing is yet, but I think I love to talk about this when I'm talking about what I do, because I really want people to see that coaching is not it's not only for when something is challenging you in life. It can also be something that's calling you forward.
Of course it can.
But it's funny because a lot of people do look at it as a fix, if you like.
But
Okay.
that's like a helicopter approach. That's not a strategic approach to how to improve your life in whatever the capacity is that you want to improve it. And I think if,
Yeah.
you look at all the best sports people, footballers, they don't have a coach that just comes in when they've not won a game. They have a consistency with their coach, and they have actually coaches on specific areas, don't they? So I
Yeah.
think I can't believe anyone would actually ever think that. But I guess maybe that education piece is really important, maybe because I don't see it like that. That's maybe some feedback that you've had as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's similar for business owners as well and recruiters, and you brought in the sport analogy there, the best sports managers, spend time whether they win, lose or draw.
Yeah, yeah,
So whether they're doing well, whether they're losing, whether they're drawing, whatever, they always look at where they're at and where they want to get to.
yeah,
Business owners and entrepreneurs can very easily fall into the trap of only really looking at it when things are going
yeah,
wrong, right?
yeah,
And we've seen this in recruitment over the last, probably 5 years, our
yeah.
post-COVID,
That's COVID,
through
yeah,
that sort of, we have that amazing time where everything was falling out of the sky for us, but nobody was looking at what we were doing then. And of course, then when it quietened down, what we noticed was, oh my gosh, we've lost skills, we've lost people.
yeah,
We've because it's been so easy, we've not been working on how we do our job.
no,
We throw tech at stuff because we think that's going to fix everything.
no,
So again, a plug here or an invitation for people is, look at your life, look at your business, look at your leadership
yeah,
in good times, bad times, and okay times,
yeah,
because there is always growth there. And
yeah.
that, I think, is something that we often miss,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Well, the thing is that I think, I'm really pleased that you contextualize it. And actually, the way you've just summarized the last few years is absolutely on the money. And I think there's been a huge deficit in understanding us as an industry, leaders understanding what makes their business great and how to circumnavigate through it. And basically just became, unintentionally complacent because we were firefighting. That's very often the case, especially in recruitment, as you know. And like you say, I'm the whole kind of distraction of what tech actually means and how it can, enhance our performance, and it should be there to support us. It's not there to replace us. I think there's so many different elements, but I have always believed that having a culture of learning and development, which includes coaching and especially leadership coaching, it really shocks me when because we have the same clients effectively. It's leaders and founders and obviously recruiters as well, that they're not taking that investment in themselves. When I think it's a bit like, to use another analogy, it's like your health. I go to the gym 5 days a week because I don't want to end up with a chronic illness. I don't want to develop type 2 diabetes, which my father had, and I had pre-triggers in my over 50 check, and I was horrified. So I've made the changes now. I've changed my diet, removed sugar, go to the gym, I eat whole foods, don't eat anything processed. I feel brilliant, touch wood, hopefully I've done enough, right? But that
Yeah.
was me looking at, and I've got 3, 4 coaches at the gym. They're amazing. They're not just saying, "Oh, you did that burpee wrong." It's, this is how you do it. What can you do to improve yourself? Let's get you to 70 kg. Let's get, or whatever the scenario is. And to me, people are happy to think about coaching in that context, but don't think of it in terms of their mindset or their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And these analogies that we have in other areas of our life are so helpful. And also is really good to work with people on, because someone who's showing up at the gym and doing that kind of work it's a great person to have the conversation with. Okay, how do we bring this into your own mindset,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
own leadership, your own business? Because they're already doing it, right? So they've got evidence that they can show up, that they can listen, they can learn, they can take on new ideas. So it's great. But so many people, don't do it. And I think, as you said about, leaders and founders in the industry are so often looking for the gap outside of themselves, right? It's always outside, something else is going on,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that I really get people to do is to look like, yes, the world's happening out there, right? The market's hard, the economy's difficult, your team aren't doing what they should be doing. Absolutely, right? That's all going on. Let's begin with you, though. Right. Let's come back to what's your leadership like? What's your communication like?
Yeah.
What's your consistency like? How curious are you about what's going on in your business?
Yeah.
Because actually, we've been taught a very old school version of leadership, if we've been taught at all. Because as you say, so many people who are leading teams, leading businesses, have never, and this isn't a criticism of them, it's just a fact, have
Yeah.
never had any leadership training.
No, I know.
So and this is the bit that I think it's hard, because if you've been leading a business for 10, 12 years or longer, it's quite
Mhm.
hard to go, I don't really know what I'm doing, because nobody's ever told me and I've just kind of bumbled along
Yeah.
hoping that I get it right.
Yeah.
It's quite, it is hard, but that's the kind of leadership. And this is where the heart-led leadership kind of, title came from. It's like, come back to who you are. Be okay with anything that you've done or not done in the past. We're not gonna beat ourselves up for it. But if we come from a place of what's going on for me right now and how can I show up differently in the world,
Yeah.
we get to create a totally different experience of our lives, our businesses, our relationships, and any area that you work on. The great news is it always ripples out into others.
Of course it does. Because
If
it's
you
changing behaviours, isn't it? And it's how you behave towards yourself. I imagine it's quite an emotive experience to go through your style of coaching then. It sounds quite emotional. I'm a real empath, by the way. Just straight
it
away,
is.
oh,
Yeah, it is. It was earlier this month I had a Beyond Limits, which is my group
yeah,
leadership program I run. We had a live experience in London where I invited lots of the people who've coached with me, worked with me, gone through the program with me into one space, and I invited 6 of those people to speak at the event. All people who wanted to go on and speak as part of their brand, if you like, in their particular field, on podcasts, in events, etc. So I wanted to create a platform for that for them. And in the room, Leisha, it was just so incredible to hear 6 people stand up and tell very emotive stories about their journeys. And most of these journeys are short. They're not over, 2 or 3 years. They're over a few months, 10 months, 12 months,
yeah,
2
yeah,
years, this sort of period. And to hear them stand up and speak about that, and the difference it's made in their lives. And some of them came to me with work they wanted to do on their business, some on their lives. But what happens is, and I talk about ripples, this is one of the things that happens if you work on your communication with
yeah.
your team in your business. Your communication gets better with your kids, it
Of
gets better
course
with
it
your
does.
husband, it gets better with your boyfriend, it gets better with your friends.
Yeah,
It ripples out into every other area of your life. And it is emotive, because at the end of the day, we're human beings. We
yeah,
are emotional beings.
yeah,
We are complex, emotional, wonderful, glorious, fantastic human beings, and we sometimes forget that. So when
yeah,
we do any of this work and we start to really learn about ourselves,
yeah,
come back home, like we were talking about
yeah,
earlier, it is emotive, and it
yeah,
can sometimes be challenging. It's not always easy, the work that I do with people, because sometimes there is some stuff that they need to work through and they need to see about themselves. So yeah, sometimes it can be awful. An old client of mine once said when he recommended me to someone else, he said, sometimes you'll leave thinking you're an absolute god, and other times you'll leave feeling, being in tears, thinking, oh my gosh, because that is sometimes the way that it goes, and sometimes having that really deep appreciation of ourselves, like
mm,
acknowledging ourselves, is a big part of the work that I do, is really important. So we stay in the gain of ourselves, and sometimes we have to just sit with some of the harder stuff. And
yeah,
again, not to beat ourselves up with, not to make ourselves feel rotten or awful about, it's just to see something that we can then shift and change behaviors,
yeah.
change how we show up in the world, and then that gets to ripple out in the rest of the world. So I mean, I'm so honored to do the work that I do, because it is so life changing.
I was just about to say that phrase, life changing. And I think it's really important to add to that as I'm listening to you now. I mean, I've had a coach, or have a coach, and I have coached. That's always been my style as well. I look back now and think that's, maybe not a manager, but more of a coach. There's no stigma to deciding at what point in your life you want to enhance whatever it is in your life. But also, I think it's making sure, and this word, I think it's got such a negative connotation to it. Maybe it's just as you get older, is to have no regrets. You know, for me, you put your flag in the sand and say, right, well, I'm doing something about it today. And it's only, I think, with some life experience and that lived experience of, what's led you to make this decision now, whether it is to enhance your leadership style, whether it's to make changes in, how you talk to yourself. Because I think, we haven't even touched on that yet. It's communicating with everybody else, but it's about how you communicate with yourself. First and foremost, to me, that's the most important person, because how I'll often say, and this is usually with friends, they'll be sort of talking about, a pretty toxic relationship. And I'm like, yeah, but how are you talking to yourself? You've just downplayed how you feel and how you look about yourself. And, and again, we live in a world, don't we, Rebecca, where, there's so much temptation. There's, all these, who even knows if they're real or AI generated people, how they look, all this perfection, all the plastic surgery and how we should behave. And then we should be doing this and we should be doing that. And it's like, no wonder there's a lot of people in crisis who possibly don't feel that they want to share that they're in a crisis. And it's actually not because of anything they've done or not done. It's just because we're in this constant world of better, could do, should do this. And it's like, actually, which is a very nice segue to where we started. If you know that that's the lane you want to be in, have the guts, have the strategy, have the coach, have that, this is what I'm going to do, and stay on that path.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you touched on something there that I spend a lot of time with for myself. It's been a journey for me, but with people that I work with is, as you say, that narrative we have with ourselves. It is so insidious a lot of the time. We don't even realize we're doing it. And it's only when I call people out on it. And often I will, and when I say call people out, it sounds awful. And it isn't. It's just, can I just reflect back to you what you've just said about yourself? Can if you could imagine saying that to your best friend or someone you love, and yet you're saying it to yourself all the time, because the voice that we hear most in our mind is our own, right? Now, one of the things that I do with my clients, though, is I get them to really listen into their voice, right? Like, I want you to start listening to your own voice. I want you to start hearing yourself. We're going to quieten the noise of everyone else for a bit, right? All of that pressure that you're talking about there, Alicia, that comes at us, right? We're just going to switch out from that for a bit. And I want you to just start listening to your own voice. And I have ways of doing that with people. A lot of people do journaling because that creates a narrative with themselves. But one of the things is just noticing how frigging awful we are to ourselves, and often how we lie to ourselves. And I call them lies because I want people to get that I lie to myself, because that often will create a real reaction, which gets them out of this sort of, I tell myself a nice story. No, you're lying. So stop lying to yourself, right? But also the other thing is, often it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Actually, when we slow down and listen to our own voice, the voice that's telling us we're not good enough, the voice that's telling us we shouldn't do this, or we can't, or when there's no way we're going to get that person or that job or that career or that money or whatever. Actually, when we really slow down and listen to it, it's not our voice, it's somebody else. Okay. And often it will be one person that really is the loudest voice, but it's a culmination of lots of people. And these are the people that we all have around us throughout our lives who tell us we can't, who limit us, right? And so one of the things we do is we identify that voice, because then we can say, look, the voice that's holding you back from everything you desire in life is not even yours. So let's get rid of that voice. Let's actually identify it, not with any malice to whoever it was, because other people are just doing the best they can with the thinking they have at the time. So the teacher that told us that we can't sing, right? By the definition of what's a good singer or not, could be true. And she didn't mean to shape the rest of your life. But unfortunately, we hear it at that very young age, and it becomes fact. It becomes fact. And then that voice becomes the voice of truth. So one of the things we do is we really break that down. So we get rid of all those other voices. And then we start tuning into our own voice and slowing down to, what is it that you really want? That's a question that I will spend a lot of time with. And most people that you ask that question don't even know, because they've never really slowed down enough to think about it.
Because they think they want what everyone has told them that they want. And very often those negative voices are the ones that actually couldn't do the thing themselves, and they therefore project that onto you. It's quite sad, really. When you say it like that, I just think I want everyone to feel that they can achieve whatever it is that they want to do. And there's no right or wrong answer. So it must just be, for anyone that's listening now, that is feeling like that. And there will be at least one person listening now that's saying, well, I've kind of got stuck. And it could be financially they're stuck, so they can't move jobs, or they've got a business. I very often have leaders kind of confiding that in me, that they're stuck. They don't even want to run their business anymore, but they can't afford to shut it down. What's a bit of a hypothetical answer though? What should they do? Like, what can they do right now today to try and get some ownership back?
Yeah. Well, that's the first thing, is one, to own it. That's the first step, right? Become aware of it. Own it as like where we are. I talk about it like a sat nav, right? If we can't put into our sat nav where we want to go unless our sat nav knows where we are right now, right? So we have to get clear on where we are. And that often is where people do get stuck, because they're not willing to own where they are, because it's
Right.
embarrassing. People are going to judge them, all of
Okay.
those.
Absolutely.
Right. So the first, and I have seen people, turn their lives around. And if you read any autobiography, there's always a point where everything was impossible until they made one decision, and then suddenly everything's possible again. Every single autobiography you read has that moment in it. So what I encourage people to do is say, look, this is your moment. The fact that you're now here, having this thought, having this conversation with a friend, going, something needs to change. That is your moment. From there on in, you are going to create exactly what you need to in your life, because you're now owning it. So the next thing is not to worry about the how so much, because that's where we get stuck. It immediately becomes how, and then it becomes can't. I
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah.
right?
It's impossible. Can't do
It's
that. Yeah.
impossible. I can't do it. What am I going to do? We get into that, and then it just kills it, right? It kills it. And what happens? We carry on doing what we're doing. So
Absolutely.
the first thing is, and I talk about it with a distinction that's reported world versus created world. The I can't is reported world. It's like a constant newsread of, you can't do this. This is all the voices, all the noise. I can't do it. I can't close the business down. I can't do what I want to do, all of those things. And it immediately then shuts us down and has us stay small. Now, there's lots I could talk about that. That's a whole other subject, right? But actually, what I point people to is created world, which is at the point at which you take ownership, you can create the world the way you want it to. And people go, oh, that's not true, because the life still happens and the market's still tough. And I'm like, no, I get that. And as soon as you take ownership of it, you can create anything that you want.
Yeah.
The first thing is, you can create a different relationship with where you are and where you want to get to. And then what we do is we, with help, a coach, a guide, a mentor, your best mate, whoever, is think about where you are, get really real about it. Think about where you want to get to as an idea. And I talk about it as a living vision. If I was to go forward a year, and I would be sat here telling Leisha what my life looked like in a year's time, and I was talking about it in the present tense, what would it be? And often it's not what people think it will be, right? And then what we do is we go, okay, now we know where we are, we know where we're going. We are now going to come back 6 months and think about where we need to be then. Then we're going to come back 3 months, two months, 1 month, 1 week. Today, what's the one thing I can do today?
You love it.
The truth is, we can only do one thing.
One thing.
And if that's ring a friend, get a coach, have a conversation, join a program, read a book, listen to a podcast. This one's a good one to listen to. Whatever it is, that one step, once you make that one step, you're already on your way. And just like a sat nav, it then, like if you go, it starts adjusting.
It's
and
rerouting. I love that analogy.
Right?
It's a great analogy. I've got a magnet, and I'm gonna try and remember it off the top of my head. It's something like, what would you wish you'd have done today in a year's time? And I bought it probably at my, if I was writing my autobiography, this would be the chapter where everything changed. And it was definitely the start of the end of my marriage. I didn't know that at the time, of course, but it was the start of my sobriety journey. And that's when I made the decision that alcohol was not working for me, and I needed to think about my health. And I was looking in the mirror going, who is this bloated, unhealthy person looking back? And I think what you've just said there is so within everybody's reach to do that it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. It doesn't matter what your scenario actually is. But the fact is that every single person listening can do that right now and say, right, we're not asking you to say, this is what I'm going to do in month 3, this is what I'm going to do in month 6. It's like, right, where do you want to be? I love that, Rebecca. That is so invaluable. And what an amazing, insightful way for people to start to think about their own journey and wherever they are in their life. to start to really own it. I think that's going to be the name of this podcast.
Just own
How,
it. Yeah.
how to own your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, and if you think, again, talking about those autobiographies, right? How many of those are just like, well, I was born, everything was great. I then started a business, everything was successful, and I'm really happy, and all my relationships are great, and I've never had any health issues or drug issues or drink issues or nothing happened. I mean, we wouldn't read it for a start because it'd be boring,
It's
right?
boring. Yeah.
Every single person, regardless of their circumstances, their, the problems they've had in their lives, those stories are inspirational because they are our stories too. And I often say to people when they're listening to anything, anyone's story, a podcast, reading a book, is read what's in it for you, because there's something in there that will offer you everything you've ever desired, everything you've ever wanted, because all of those people have had that moment, like you say. And I've had several of them in my life, right? Several moments that have been fundamental in making a change in my life. Did it all change overnight? No.
No.
Did it give me everything I wanted in the way that I thought it would show up? No.
Yeah.
Has it completely changed the way that I am in the world?
Yeah.
How I show up in the world? Absolutely, every way.
Absolutely.
Am I there yet? No, because I think it's a journey that I will be on until, whenever.
Yeah, of course it is. You
Right?
never stop learning about it, do you? I
No.
mean, we could finish on a really good sort of health related one, is that if there's anyone listening that's done a marathon or done some kind of high rocks, you did not get up on day one and run a marathon. You did the
Absolutely.
couch to 5K. You probably started running for 500 yards, walking 500 yards, running for, literally starting like that.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. It's actually saying couch to 5K, right? I know I want to do 5K at some point, but I'm going to start with, I'll just run to the end of the street. And that's all we're talking about. It's the little 1% increments that will get
Yeah.
you to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Well, I knew this
Great.
was going to be amazing, Rebecca, but I didn't know just how amazing it was going to be. I feel so inspired by you, and you're just so wonderful. And we've got a lot of similar insights, I think, into how the world is. Maybe that's through the shared life experiences that we've gone through. But
Yeah, and this is the other thing. The more people you speak to, you realize that there are so many. We might have different paths, but the essence of it, so many of our stories are the same. And the more that you open up your heart to other people and their journeys, and open your own up, the more opportunity you have for conversations like this, which might be the inspiration for someone who's listening. And even if it's one person, I'll be happy, who goes, I'm going to do something today that's going to change my life.
I would say that I hope I have got more than one listener, but if I have only got one listener and this has resonated, then that was my intention. I've said that right from the start of this podcast 5 years ago, but I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that, I'm a huge advocate for diversity and inclusion. Obviously, one of our partners is Joe Major, our joint friend.
Yes.
But I think we have more in common than we don't. And that's what makes my job so brilliant and your job so brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing this with us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Thank you.